Hold on. Don't tell me this
Kind
is...
of strange not having Sebastian here. Usually he's on these kind of things.
Bro, don't tell... Oh, wait. Am I on? Hold on. Please tell me I'm
If
on.
you're live.
Yeah, because...
Yeah, it says you're live.
Is it? Yeah. Make sure the
I think there's audio. I think the audio is working too, by the way.
Oh, wait, so I'm actually live. Hello.
Howdy, everybody.
What's up, everybody? Because it's still loading for me on my thing. Still loading. But can you guys make sure on the actual like stream is it working?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Check on YouTube.
Yeah, check on YouTube, please. Because it says for me an error occurred. Please try again later. But you guys are saying that it's actually working.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's working?
Yeah. It is.
Let me check on my end. Sorry guys, if this is actually working, just bear with us because I'm trying to sort everything out because I have not used this type of streaming before. Let me see. Wow, it actually says I'm live. The audio is working too?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's working for me, yeah.
It's working for you. All right, so I guess we'll start then. How's everybody doing? Welcome in to the day one live stream. Gonna wait another minute or two to see if some people join because we got to get some viewers in. Wow, we're actually streaming. Oh, let me see. This is working. Anyways, let me see. Oh yeah, so it is working. Okay. All right, that confirms it. All right. How's everybody doing? And yeah, welcome to our live stream for the first day of the hurricane season, June 1st. Going to go over a lot today, including the very random appearance of Tropical Depression 2. Did not expect this at all, honestly. Welcome in, Jeremiah Joseph. Says Cansips, I believe that's what he meant. Anomalies look very interesting in August. Yes, they do. We're going to go over that later on in the stream. Because I'm going to have all my predictions and everything later on. But welcome in, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And if you cannot already tell, I got some guests with us. So, of course, everybody that is here with us, if you don't mind, introduce yourselves.
I guess I start. I'm Danny Alvarez, aka Weatherhook TV. I don't post as much as I used to, but here I am. Hey guys, Nathan. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm WXNate. Hope we have a good discussion today.
Hello, I'm the Hurricane HQ. I don't post as much, but I still exist. You can find me on social media.
Yeah. All right, so I guess that does cover everybody, and probably expecting some more people to come anyway. But I guess the talk of the town, tropical depression too. Let's just start off by talking about that. What do you guys think of this? I was not expecting this at all.
It did develop really quickly, I must say.
Yeah,
Been on the models for a while, but it developed really quickly, and that's in a marginally favorable environment. So decent, impressive system for the start of hurricane season.
yeah, definitely.
Right on cue. Right on cue.
Yeah, funny
Yeah,
enough, first storm on the first day, well, first official storm on the first day of the season. 35 miles per hour it is, and 1,007 millibars. And this is actually very surprised to find out that it's actually moving very slowly right now, 2 miles per hour to the west northwest. And it's expected to do very wacky things throughout its lifespan, including take a dip south, but we'll go over that in a little bit. The advisory right now, of course, tropical depression forms in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico, expected to remain offshore and be short-lived. And yes, the National Hurricane Center is forecasting that this will become a named storm. In my opinion, it'll probably be a disappointment if it doesn't. But that's a debate for another time. But anyways, they do forecast it, and you can see on the satellite really when we mean by marginal conditions, we truly mean marginal conditions. I mean, you just take a look at the satellite. A lot of shear right now, definitely dry air, and convection becoming a lot less organized compared to how it was earlier today. But there is some sort of structure with it, and definitely enough for it to gain a name. What do you guys think?
This place, this system got really lucky. Like it got right into the sweet spot of where like there was somewhat quite favorable conditions in the Gulf. Because, if you look at shear like maps and stuff, like where it's at right now is the only place in the whole Gulf that has somewhat decent
Hmm.
shear anomalies. Like everywhere else is completely unfavorable, and here there's no dry air, or at least not as much as other places in the Gulf.
Yeah,
Which I'm surprised. Like it got really lucky. This system was at the right place at the right time.
yeah, definitely very interesting storm. Anybody else? What do you guys think? You guys, you might want to up your audio. Whoever's talking. Um, but really quickly, why not just take a look at it? The NHC cone, and yeah, they are forecasting that this is going to become a named storm, at least. And some already argue that this is a named storm already.
I thought personally it was at 5 p.m. Like they would have made put it a storm. I was low key kind of shocked they didn't.
Yeah,
Because I mean, you had like the wind barbs that were like 35 knots in a couple of ways, a couple of showings in the recon, but they still just said 35. I guess it's the structure of it, or just that they're not really happy of how it looks. And it doesn't look too good for their liking to name it. I think that's the only reason they didn't call it a storm.
yeah,
yeah, they probably just contributed because of the lack of conviction. Because earlier today, before recon, there were some ASCAT passes that may have proved that it was a TC or is a TC. Is, I should say. But I guess if it can refire convection overnight, then we should see it upgraded to a tropical storage.
yeah, probably. Uh, I mean, we'll have to see if shear does go down because I actually did see the shear is kind of high right now. But I mean, in terms of this developing into some sort of tropical system, the models do forecast it. That's for sure. Well, some of them. At least of the latest model run. This is, by the way, by Tropical Tidbits from Levi Cowan. This is the intensity model guidance, and I remember seeing earlier today that there was only one model that showed it developing or reaching tropical storm intensity. Now there's roughly four in there, so there's definitely consensus of somewhat for this to develop into some sort of system. or this further develop maybe, but whether or not it reaches tropical storm, we'll have to see. But depends on conditions, of course. This is the model track guidance, and I guess basically in line with what the NHC has, they kind of have this taking a southerly dip, which is, as far as I'm concerned, this is something very interesting. We've never really seen something like this, where we have a storm that dips south in the Gulf. Really not usual at all.
I looked at like historic tracks and stuff. There's only one system in the last 120 years that's had something similar to this. Out of everything, only like one thing. It was like October of 1911. There was something similar to this,
Oh,
but
let me
that's
see.
about it.
Let me see. I'm gonna search it up right now. October. This is in October.
It was like like October 25th of 1911. He
Oh,
had
I
something
see.
form around the same spot and on a similar track.
That's it. That's interesting. I see it right now here. Um, yeah, that's the track. That's interesting. And I guess this kind of does go to show the wacky pattern we kind of have right now, because we're talking about an October storm and this is June. And usually we think about traditional June storms, and October storms sometimes come out of CAG, Central American gyres. And this one is coming from some sort of, I'd assume, mesoscale. Well, this is definitely coming from a mesoscale system, but I'd assume
At
that,
first, I didn't buy this because I remember like a week ago at this point there was like some sort of signal in the European model like around this time frame,
yeah,
and I was like, I didn't. They did something similar to what it is doing right now, but I didn't really buy it because like it just didn't fit this time of year. But with how 2023 is setting up to be, like, why am I surprised if every storm just could be anomalies, right? Because this year is an anomaly as a whole. It looks like.
yeah, very interesting. But I will say though, when it comes to conditions, the Gulf of Mexico is definitely warm. Though we have 27 degrees Celsius, and increasing as the storm heads southward. It is 28 degrees Celsius over the central and southern Gulf of Mexico, and 27 degrees Celsius as we go a little bit further north than that. Um, and the coldest of the waters right now, which is in the northeastern Gulf near the Florida Peninsula, near the Florida Panhandle. That is not in the path of this storm, so wouldn't be concerned about sea surface temperature anomalies though. And I guess for this to be a named system, this does have the look. This is the 850 millibar vorticity, and you can very much see uh, you can very much see, indeed, that there is bona fide vorticity associated with this. And you can even see some reds in there. So that indicates, as we usually talk about, a lot of vorticity, very strong spin in the atmosphere. Hence, I guess, which is why this was a named storm. Or this definitely had indeed a reason to be named. So there's that. But of course, when we talk about marginally favorable environment, you could take a look at it right here on CIMS tropical cyclones. Um, a lot of wind shear, especially in the Gulf, and this is the latest. This is the latest frame that they have for the Northern Gulf. You could see values, at least from this map, up to 25, 30 knots. So a lot of strong wind shear, and that's certainly not favorable for any significant development of this system. And it'll probably especially be a problem for this longer term when it gets into the Southern Gulf as well.
It's gonna be so cooked down there.
Oh yeah, dry air, and I think we could even look at dry air as well, water vapor. It's really, it really
Next
drops
week,
it.
I feel like will be tomorrow night. Personally,
Yeah, somewhere around that.
for me, the best chance for this thing.
Oh, very, very
Yeah,
dry. Yeah.
I think the model is really going with what NHC says. I think if it doesn't become a taste by tomorrow evening, I don't think it has much of a chance to be named at all because of how marginal the um, marginal how marginal the environment is.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. We'll say that water vapor though in the southern Gulf is very dry, and unless, like you were saying, Nate, if it doesn't get its act together overnight, right? It's not gonna do it. Might not even get a name, which is gonna be disappointing in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
But
It's a convective burst away from getting a storm, from being a storm. But if it
yeah,
doesn't happen, it's not gonna be a storm. You know, like it's only has only one chance to do it,
yeah,
in
and
my opinion.
Pretty much, yeah.
and Alan on the chat. Hey Alan, how you doing? This thing is only getting affected by low level shear, not upper level. And he says the shear is 15 to 20 knots in the lower level. So that would probably explain, I guess, some of the disorganization that's been happening as of recently. But I mean, you do notice there's a convective burst beginning to develop side of this. So maybe we'll have to see if that has some sort of
Yeah,
impact.
I've noticed that at nighttime around this time is when it starts to like I guess act together more. Like last night, it was
Yeah.
not looking good at this point, but like overnight, it really it got going. But
You know,
not how far.
I especially over the last few years when I've been really tracking, because I more or less started tracking in 2020. I've really been noticing that a lot of these weaker storms, especially, they start blowing up the night before, the evening before, and then they have the whole entire night to blow up, and then by the morning they look like an absolute beast in terms of convective activity, these weaker storms. And then we get this idea that, oh, they're maybe strengthening significantly, and then somehow in the afternoon they just kind of dissipate. You know what I mean? I don't know if this
Right,
is,
it's just like less daytime. It's like more favorable for the storm. Like just a little bit less sheer nighttime, I guess, and it
yeah, I don't
helps it
know.
out. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a trend I've been seeing though over the last few years. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Probably do, but I remember. But this was
I remember researching it one time. I think there was an article that said normally when storms fire up during beaming, because that's what we're approaching now,
yeah,
it normally is a sign of the system maturing, and eventually, if it has the time, I don't think this will have the time, but eventually they become more resistant to the diurnal cycle.
yeah.
So I
That's
guess that's
yeah,
part of it.
and that usually starts occurring once we start seeing strengthening with this with when we start with these weaker systems, right? We usually start eventually
Yeah,
as they start strengthening, they become more resistant to the diurnal cycle, as you just said. But of course, this won't have time because this is going to be dead in like a day or two. So
yeah, yeah. I think it has to do with the fact that tropical cyclones kind of circulate the heat. Over time, they basically self-reliant. That's why you sometimes, like with this snow, with TD, um, what is this level as? TD 1 or 2?
Two,
two,
two.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, as we see with this, with the convection firing up as sunset comes on, it
hmm.
basically is a sign that um the system is becoming um more self-sufficient, even though it won't be like that for long because of the increasingly unfavorable environment. But yeah, that same trend I've realized it as well over the past few years.
Yeah, it's always these weaker storms, and then once they become stronger, they start resisting it more, and then eventually they just and then eventually they're able to develop into these big tropical systems, tropical cyclones. Um, but lack of long trackers, really. Like long track storms that we kind of see this all develop in a cycle over a course of several days. And I'm kind of throwing a hint
Yeah,
at everybody right now for what I think for my prediction. So stay tuned for that. But when it does come to predictions, Philip Klotzbach today released his prediction for Colorado State. And we were just talking about this before the stream. Kind of surprised at the outcome at his prediction 15 named storms, which is an upgrade. especially from April. 77 hurricanes and three major hurricanes with an ACE index, accumulated cyclone energy, the amount of energy that is output from the strength of a system and how long it lasts too. That are some things that are taken into consideration with accumulated cyclone energy that is forecast at 125. And you see the 1991 to 2020 average is 123, so actually slightly above the average. And this is an El Nino year, and that certainly has a lot of people talking. I'd imagine certainly has me talking because I'm surprised they went with 15.
I am too. I am. I was thinking maybe they go 14.
Yeah,
14 I was thinking, I don't know,
same.
14 6-2, but like, or 7-2, but like, I did not expect them to go 15 and add a major as well to the prediction and add 25 extra ace than before.
Yeah,
Because it was 100 and it went to 125, which got me off guard. I didn't expect them to get that much of a jump in a month and a half.
yeah, certainly very interesting indeed. Let's see, Alan Snyder, or that's his full name. Alan did say big bursts of convection going on. Yes, indeed, we were just talking about it. A big burst of convection, and we'll have to see. Does this actually have some sort of impact? Because if I remember last night correctly, there was some sort of big convective burst that began to occur, and that kind of pulled the LLC into it a little bit, and that's how we see the organization that we saw today. Not too entirely sure because I wasn't keeping up with that part of the system as much because I was not really certain that it would do much. Uh, but that's at least what's occurring with this right now. And wasn't that what occurred last night or something like that?
It definitely helped what we saw this morning. The convective burst kind of settled it
I
in a
think
good way.
it was a very
Yeah.
yeah. I remember around about midnight last night there were some tweets about convective activity going again, and I think by this morning um it caused the NET to up its chances a good bit. They just continued to develop rapidly during the daytime, and that's why we have our TD now.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, but the LOC was ill-defined then. Yeah, I do remember last night was a lot more of a elongated sort of low-level center situation, right? And then now today it's much more defined, and at least me, I'm saying it's because of that convective burst that occurred last night. I definitely remember there was a big convective burst. I guess that's what it was. Um, but I guess moving away from tropical depression too for a while, let's take a look at the models for the next few days. Why not? And let's see. Let me check the Eastern Pacific first though, because I don't know about you guys, but hasn't the Eastern Pacific been too dead on the models? Like absolutely nothing at all.
And
Yeah,
being
it's
honest,
kind of
I'm not really surprised about it. Like looking at models like 2 months ago, they
Oh,
were
hold
not
on.
really forecasting like East Pack to be that active early on, and like
Yeah.
it's actually happening like that. It's surprising that I actually see it, but like I'm not surprised that overall that it is happening because there's been like it's been signs that it was gonna happen the way it is right
The
now.
only thing that I could see that maybe the might be trying to get going is something that's well over 300 hours out. That's some sort of small vorticity area. Actually, there's something a little bit on there too. On the 12Z, they let's see, the 18Z have it. No, so yeah, basically safe to say that
I
at least over.
remember
Yeah.
I remember seeing a few people say that in some El Nino years the impact normally doesn't get going until like June, July. But I mean at the same time it does kind of seem weird for somebody that only started tracking like 2 years ago. Because, alright, considering the epoch season officially starts before the NHL season, we'll see that the NATL has already produced twice before the impact. It's weird, but I guess over time we'll see when the impact starts to produce
Yeah,
because there's a lot of heat stored over there, especially with the impending El Nino. The only thing is that the PO is still negative, but I'm not sure how much longer that's going to last.
probably will
Probably
last for
going
the
to see
next
that on
month
the
or
time
two, I'd
model
say,
soon. Yeah,
because models
but
still seem
I
to
think
have it
that
hanging out. Yeah,
during the season,
yeah, during at least from what I've
during
seen from some of the climate
oh
models, they kind of have it hanging out a little bit, the negative PDO. The not entirely, but like
yeah,
barely hanging on at least. Let me see. Uh, by the
but
way, if
yeah,
you're
I
yeah,
think that once EPUB starts to get going, it's going to be hard to get it to stop. Um, especially like July, August, unless something goes wrong. I'm
hmm,
not sure what would go wrong. Um, maybe the PDO will affect it somewhat if it stays negative, but
yeah,
other than that, I can't see too much going wrong for the EPUB this year. Once we get into peak season.
yeah. By the way, if you're wondering what you're seeing on your screen right now, I'm putting up the European ensemble for the MJO, the velocity potential. And I'm just seeing this for the first time right now, and I'm actually kind of surprised that because before, when I would see this, they would not have the Africa. Because see, if you guys don't know what this green is, that's an African standing wave over the screen over Africa. And I'm just seeing this for the first time, and they actually seem that they want to continue the African standing wave up until July. Because before they didn't have that, now they do, which is interesting. But I also do remember seeing before they had this huge MJO pulse around early June, roughly around South America. Now that's not really the case anymore. But they do kind of have it closer towards later June. Uh, what do you guys think about that? Because one thing that is very interesting this year is the African standing wave, because that'll have a huge impact on whether or not we have a strong monsoon, and that'll have a whole sort of different impact on how the atmosphere will work in general this year, especially taking into consideration how warm the Atlantic is. We're like second behind 2010, uh, if I'm not mistaken. And you just can't help but wonder, will there be some sort of impact to the atmosphere with the very warm Atlantic we have on this El Nino?
Manos definitely
Yeah,
think that
no, go on then.
models definitely think that that they're not. It's like it's like a La Nina out there. Like I don't know how to explain it, but like it doesn't even. It does. It looks like an opposite of El Nino, to be honest. In the model, it's insane, bro.
Yeah,
Hmm. And the European, if I'm not mistaken, is
and
showing a
it's
strong
something.
El Nino by like August. I don't know.
Yeah,
The models are
and it's
weird
not
this year.
it's not even new either. It's something they've been showing for a while now, which is odd. Because you would expect that, considering they're showing a strong El Nino, you'd think that share values would be high across the Atlantic basin, but they don't show that. So I'm not sure if they know something we don't, or if they're
Maybe.
just being crazy. I mean, if you look at like the other um panels on the models, there doesn't really seem to be anything wrong with like VP or anything. 'Cause I
Yeah.
remember Concepts having a VP problem like a year or two ago, and it kind of messed up all the other factors on the model. But that
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
seem
I
to be
remember
happening
that.
now.
I remember that. And
Yeah,
everybody's saying
Yeah.
that this latest model run of the Cansips, which if you've not seen it, I'll actually I have some pictures and some snap what the fuck, some screenshots, whatever the fuck I was trying to say. Um, on the Cansips in my forecast, so you'll be able to see what the Cansips is showing in a little bit. But I've been seeing a lot of questions about the Cansips possibly being over beefed in this latest model run, and as you pointed out, Nate, there's no the main problem, because I remember when this happened, it was at the beginning of 2022. The Cansips was absolutely well overblown, and they were showing everything all completely messed up in the Atlantic, and they were showing, like, in my opinion, what I told, and I think you remember this, Danny, what looked like the Kansas was trying to show a 30 named storm years or something like that in the Atlantic. It was crazy, and
yeah, it was just
everybody's
like wet the entire
yeah,
like high precipitation of the entire season.
yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, people say take the latest Kansas run with the ultra grain of salt, and I disagree with that, honestly, because all the other models they have the same exact copy of what the Kansas in the latest model is showing. And so, yeah, I disagree. Definitely doesn't.
If it was a story that there was no other model showing anything and it was just the concepts, then I would get it. But it's been consistent, the same for like months now. It doesn't seem like it's changing to the opposite
Yeah,
way. It looks like it's continuing to point in the direction of what it is showing.
yeah. The NMME
Yeah.
2 is another model that has been showing. The NMME is another model that's been showing a lot of precipitation in across the Atlantic and other what would be seeming very favorable factors, and yet nobody's questioning whether or not that's beefed up. And the European too. Well, I mean, people are actually questioning the European. I mean,
Normally,
you just saw the UK Met with their forecast, 222 ace, and that was based off the European uh, forecast, generated forecasts. And but the thing is, the Kansas at the NMME is showing it. I'm not saying we'll have 222 ace, but precipitation wise and those type of factors, the Europe showing similar to what every other model is doing. I even saw the UK Met climate model that some people posted on Twitter, and they show the same thing. So I don't really buy this whole idea that the Kansas is beefed up.
normally when I don't trust what I'm seeing on CFS or I can't zips, I go to NMME, and considering it shows basically the same thing what the other two show, or at least zips for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. I think that there might be something that we're just missing with our hurricane season predictions, but things that we're not really sure what it is. So that's why we're all confused.
Yeah,
Because I hate saying that model, but yeah, it's a proven model, so widely used one. So I don't think that um, so many models would be getting the same thing wrong um,
yeah,
over such a long period of time. But we'll see.
we'll see. Yeah. Uh, hold on, I'm trying to get somebody in here. We'll see, but I don't know. What do you guys think of all the other models too? Because I mean, we saw the European with the UK Met forecast, and
July gets me really intrigued. Like, in terms of precip amount, especially in the CFS.
yeah,
It looks like, I don't know, like July's trying to make a September impression.
Jeremiah Joseph says CanTips is now showing what CFS was showing in May for August precipitation. Yeah, that's what I noticed. CanTips is kind of showing what the CFS was showing in May. I remember, especially a few days ago, the CFS was really aggressive with August. I was probably, and I'm still shocked at how kind of aggressive the CFS is with precipitation as a whole in the Atlantic. And you would usually think this, and usually you would kind of see that the CFS is one of the first models to be absolutely bearish when it comes to precipitation in the Atlantic. So weird, so backward too.
Exactly.
July, even if I don't know, like just looking at July, it gets me worried, bro. Like for real.
Gets me very intrigued. Oh, by the way, on what I have on the stream right now is a picture of Mawar, tropical storm Mawar. Well, what was arguably a near 200-mile-per-hour Western Pacific monster. Really quick thoughts on that. I'm actually gonna bring up.
Guam got lucky in the aspect that they didn't get the worst of it.
Yeah, this thing
They
was.
got hit badly, but somehow it could have been like 3 or 4 times worse than it actually was.
Yeah, this thing was passed right near Guam, right when it was still intensifying. It was not even anywhere near peak.
But it actually hit Guam between its two peaks, which was really fortunate because the first peak was arguably a Cat 5, and then its second peak was arguably one of the strongest storms we've ever seen. So Guam got really lucky.
Yep. Very lucky.
And I think that's a convection burst over center for O2L.
So, yeah, we were just talking about it not long ago. Hold on, let me go back to it.
I could have some stuff that I could point out. Just real quick.
Tropical Depression 2. Let's go back. Let me bring up the visible sat shortwave. No, the IR shortwave. Yeah, there's a seemingly a new convective burst beginning to develop. And Yoshi, we were talking about while you're gone, we were talking about by the way, we have one of my other friends, Yoshi, on now. If he cannot guess already. But we were talking about earlier, there was a convective burst last night that kind of helped this develop to the organization it had today, that, or at least set the foundation for the organization for that.
I mean, I think it wasn't the convection burst itself. It had to be in a healthy environment to do so. The fact, and we all knew that chances were going to go up real soon because that there was a large convection during diurnal minimum, which suppresses convection. And if you see that in a system, that means that the environment it is in is really, really healthy.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point. But whatever did happen yesterday definitely did help, in my opinion, with the organization for today. Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on, I have to go for a minute.
Oh, all right. Well, we lost him again. But anyways, yeah. But yeah, really, I have the light on. There definitely is some sort of moderate convectives going on. It is somewhat away from the center though, so we'll have to see if maybe, who knows, maybe the center gets slugged eastward into this convective burst. Depends on if this is favorable or not. What do you guys think?
If it's gonna happen, it's gonna have to happen like overnight. You know, like this is its best opportunity for the convection to allow it.
Yeah. Let me actually take a look at the NHC forecast discussion, because that is actually a good place to look at what the forecaster is, forecasting, why they have their forecast forecasts, and one good place to look at is the forecast discussion, and let's see what they have. First of all, I want to see why they did not. Yeah, the most recent TAFE Dvorak fix provided a data T number of 2 punches, 30 knots. Based on all the above data, the system is enough organization to be tropical depression 2. There's a small window for intensification over the next 12 to 24 hours. So basically, what we've been seeing, while ships diagnose. Why? Sometimes I'm not good with English. I don't know why. But the shear is quite high, above 30 knots, and with plenty of dry air lurking to the west, and GOES 16 derived motion winds suggest the cold cloud tops only extend up to 300 millibars, where westerly flow is currently lighter. This factor may explain why upper level cirrus outflow has been expanding westward away from the center in a northern semicircle. Sea surface temperatures are between 26 and 27 degrees Celsius, so sea surface temperatures are definitely not a problem. But as of course with what NHC is mentioning here, the shear is, and it'll definitely become an issue for this more than it already is by the time it's positioned on the upstream side of the upper level trough by Friday night into Saturday. And then with that, they said that's where subsidence may inhibit additional convection. So actually, they're saying that the position of where this will be from the trough is what's going to cause this to lose convection and eventually weaken. So it's not even the fact that the shear will probably increase. Seems like from what they're saying.
I guess it's the other, like, I don't know, like the other like rain system that's in the other side of Florida right now.
Yeah. We'll have to see though. But definitely tonight into tomorrow, it's its best chance for any sort of intensification or development, which will probably be minimal.
I say it peaks at like 45 miles per hour.
Oh, I'm saying 40. I'm saying 40 miles.
Oh, so you're going with the NHC?
1,004 millibars.
Yeah.
When is the first recon mission tomorrow?
I have no clue.
First recon went through today. It passed through the center 2 times. It did support tropical storm force winds. However, the NHC was hesitant on that because Dvorak also showed that there was probably not any tropical storm winds. So the NHC decided to go conservative. It also showed that yes, there was an LLC, yes, it was closed, and that yes, it was some kind of formed tropical system.
So their basis for not going with TS was that Borak didn't support it, basically.
It could people are saying TS, but the NHC isn't saying that because I already told you. I'm not gonna repeat myself unless people want me to.
I'm just wondering because I know Ascat seemed to have supported it earlier today, but I guess because of the decrease in convection, they didn't.
Decreasing convection is normal at this time of hour. Over there, diurnal minimum should be starting to happen, and plus it's drier all around it. However, its convection is keeping itself up. We'll probably go to tropical storm by 11 p.m. Not so much right now as of the 8 p.m. update, though.
Yeah.
Mainly,
well, I mean, they're not going to release the 8 p.m.
one,
update anyway, though, because there's no
two,
warnings.
ASCAR will probably miss, so we don't have enough data in general. And 3, it has looked slightly worse, but that was to be expected.
Yeah. HWARF, I will say, definitely less aggressive than yesterday, but I think I remember mentioning in yesterday's video or yesterday or this morning's video, HWARF does sometimes tend to go aggressive on systems that are not yet developed or just developed before we get recon data and they then kind of go back to reality. So now because I remember yesterday the H wave had a peak of 50 knots, kind of impressive, and
50
now
knots, dude. No one was gonna believe that.
the H wave, yeah, they went with 50 knots yesterday, and now they're only going to 40. So
And I think there were some mesoscale models that were showing like a building core, like a few of the core. Was
yeah, you cannot
Mesoscale
put.
models are never good at actual tropical systems.
I will give it to though that the mesoscale models were able to kind of pick this out, developing into an entity in the
Yeah,
first place.
it did develop it, so props to them.
Yeah, props to them for that. But
they
mesoscale
were
models,
more
I will say this: I remember with Arthur, they were showing mesoscale models were showing that Arthur becoming a C2. So
That's just hilarious.
yeah. Next recon is at 11:30 Z tomorrow morning, so that should be 7:30 a.m. Eastern time.
Ah, crap! I'll probably miss it. Unless if I don't go to school tomorrow, which that's a possibility, but not a 100. So I'm not too sure yet. But if I do have the announcement that I don't go to school, that means I can track it more. And I will tell y'all as soon as I can.
All right. I mean, I definitely gotta go to school tomorrow because I'm busy as hell tomorrow. Got a lot of stuff
Tomorrow's
going
a
on.
final day, so really couldn't care either way.
My final day is not for a few weeks. Lucky. Well, week and a half.
Yeah.
Week and a
I
half,
finished
then I
in
got
2 weeks.
week and a half, then I
I'm in
got
college,
final
so that's
exams.
different. But you know,
Yeah. Whatever.
I could be wrong, but I feel like NHC won't go TS until Recon goes into it.
So tomorrow they probably won't name it TS till
I don't
tomorrow
know.
morning.
Yeah, I just feel like that's a decent possibility, but I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I
honestly,
would
I
say
feel
like
like
5 or 11 a.m. 5 or 11 is
yeah,
what they call
honestly,
it.
that's what I think that
Yeah,
they'll probably
unless
do.
convection, if convection really gets going and then ASCAT supports it solidly, then maybe. But other than that, don't think that I don't think that it's necessarily um, the likeliest thing that they go TS before Recon goes into it.
Hmm. Alan said, "It's June. Why y'all still in school?" Well, New York works differently, and I wish I was down south where everybody ends in mid-May, but I end in mid-June and sometimes late June, depending on what grade I'm in. So, yeah.
In 2021, I didn't finish school until July.
July. Damn.
Yep,
And
Sounds
when do
like
I
you
had
come back?
extra school.
what?
Most schools, most schools out here actually finish in June, so it's a regular thing for me.
Yeah, at least for where I am, New York. It's a regular thing for me to be usually end late June or something. Middle elementary schools they end late June. I high schools end early June, or mid June, and then they have final exams for the rest of the month, and then yeah.
Down here, like usually at high schools, we finish around like June 5th or 6th, mostly every year. Like in high school, yeah, like I would finish, yeah, like in the middle of the second week of June, basically, or sometimes like at the end of the first week.
Mm-hmm. um. So I guess we got 10 minutes till I reveal my forecast. I reveal my secrets of what I think the season will be like. Updated, obviously, because I already have some ideas from April. If you've not seen that, well, sucks to be you because that's about to go obsolete. Um, who left? Let's see.
Yoshi.
Oh, here we go.
But
But any thoughts for the future for the rest of the month at least?
Say 1, 2 storms more, maybe.
Fair.
I'll watch out for
I,
LinkedIn.
yeah, I've seen where some models have a drop off in share during like the middle to the latter parts of the month. And shockingly, I remember seeing something like that in the Caribbean. So
I mean, model. They've been
we'll
trying
see
to.
if other
Yeah.
we'll see if other environmental factors support something like that because the Caribbean isn't really the most likely place you'd expect TC development in June. Normally, maybe just outside, like between 40 and 60 west, but not necessarily in the eastern Caribbean.
Mm,
It could happen in the western Caribbean.
yeah.
There's a lot of things though.
Caribbean honestly looks very favorable, like for like the standards for this time of year. I'm kind of surprised about that. Like what I've been seeing in the modeling, especially for that.
Yeah.
I
By
was
the
thinking
way,
that Caribbean may have been completely shut down this year, but it may not be after all.
yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
By the way, have you guys noticed on the European ensembles, they've had a, I don't know why they do this, but for some reason they've showed some sort of lows, a few low tracks in the MDR. They're all very weak, but they kind of been showing, I guess, maybe a hint of that I would presume would be that strong tropical wave that moved off the coast of Africa a few days ago. But there's some sort of weird signal in the European that they have some sort of weak lows, notable weak lows in the MDR. And I'm looking at weathernerds.org. By the way, it's very interesting. I don't know why, but they show it.
Is it that the overall pressure in the MDR drops off? Because that may be a sign of the standing wave setting up.
I guess so.
And maybe as well the one. Well, I mean the one already has gotten going with those strong waves we've been seeing in the past week or two.
I've been looking at shear anomalies for the next 7 to 12 days in the MDR, and they're well below normal in the MDR and some parts of the Caribbean.
Yeah. Um, I've been seeing though. I've been seeing though. What am I trying to say? Maybe as we have the standing wave set up, especially considering the warm Atlantic, maybe we'll try to get some sort of. Maybe there's this one rogue tropical wave that tries to pull a Brett or something this month.
Not out of question. Not out of question.
That's at least something that I've been seeing, but it's very interesting. We'll see. We'll see what
I
occurs.
definitely think we'll see an AOI or two from waves in June,
Yeah, probably.
considering considering the models have shared not being as high,
Yeah.
and we've not really been seeing much sell, which is also shocking to me.
Yeah.
Since the season started, so yeah, I
Hmm.
think that this month will have at least one more storm from somewhere.
Alan says I go with one or two more name storms after this. So basically, everybody agreeing we'll have
Yeah.
at least one or two more storms after what we have for this month. Since we're on the topic, why not? Why not early July? What do you guys think for July?
I'm gonna be kind of aggressive here. Um,
Okay.
honestly, I would not rule out a major hurricane in July this year. crazy, but what I've been seeing, like, it is definitely possible. Definitely more than different years that I've tracked with the MDR especially. I see like maybe 3 to 4 storms in July.
Interesting. Uh, I don't know. The precipitation forecast in the models for basically the entire season has all been very interesting. So we'll have to see. Probably, possibly could happen. I mean, gotta consider if the African monsoon is very strong, we have some sort of rogue tropical wave that, I don't know, takes shape and ends up trying to do something.
Because the shear anomalies in the MDR are very low. They're in the Caribbean too.
Yeah,
If something, I don't know, you get a window in the Caribbean, I would say watch out in July, like for real. Like I
maybe.
do not trust the Caribbean in July this year. I think it could post something interesting if there's an opportunity.
Uh, we'll see. Nate, what do you think?
Well, I think that the MDR won't take too long to get going in terms of producing solid AOI. I think, as I said earlier, we'll start seeing that from this month.
Yeah,
Um, I don't like to look too far out because, like in the past, I did that a lot, and oftentimes you see something drastically different from what you expect. But
yeah,
I think that considering how the models have been consistent on what they've been showing for the basin, I think that for July, the MDR will produce a few storms. I think we might get an early threat from maybe the Eastern Caribbean.
I agree.
Uh, and I guess with the with people talking about the East Coast probably being hotspot this year, I guess we'll see if we see one of those systems that takes advantage of the Gulf Stream. Because that has happened a few times in the
yeah.
past years.
Though I will
Can't
I
rule
mention
wouldn't
that.
out
be
those. Yeah,
surprised.
Yeah, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that again this year.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We'll see. I will mention though the Gulf Stream is kind of is a little cold, the subtropics in general, and I think that's actually what's gonna maybe help this year a little bit. And I've even noticed, of course, till last year, till the subtropics went completely ham and absolutely exploded with warmth. I remember early on in
Yeah,
June, it was actually quite cooler, and similar situation happening this year. And I'm starting to wonder if maybe there could be a trend to a cooler subtropics that eventually will begin to take place in the next few years.
it's possible. One thing I've taken good notice of, well, somebody showed me, is that the equatorial Atlantic has been a little cool, and now we're wondering if the AMM might be positive going into the season because
I think it
that
already is.
would likely cause the IT season to lift north a bit and make it
Yeah,
more favorable for waves to make it across the basin. And I just looked at a super blend of Euro and UK Met from Ben Noel on Twitter. Um, the blend of the models actually shows that the IT season lifts pretty well in the basin, and because of the likelihood for the warp to be strong is a lot of there's a wide area of hypership anomalies in the FDR, and it spreads throughout the subtropics. So I think there's a good chance if um, we don't have very strong thought activity, we'll see.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance that we have strong waves that are able to um, travel across the basin and develop at some point before dissipating.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. All right. It is now 8 o'clock, and you know what time it is now for? It is time for my predictions, which we are going to do. You guys ready? Here we go.
Sure.
Yes,
Gonna do my
sir.
predictions now. And finally, we'll reveal what I think for this hurricane season. Great segue though from talking about the West African monsoon and its potential, as we were talking about, maybe some sort of strong wave action. Definitely something you want to keep in mind for this forecast, because that's something I'm definitely thought about a lot, especially in the making of this forecast, and of course the impacts on that would have with El Nino. So something to keep in mind as we go through. But here it is, the updated hurricane season predictions, and let's begin. A year in review. First of all, though, with the 2022 hurricane season last year, we had 14 named storms, 8 hurricanes, and 2 major hurricanes, with a total U.S. landfalls of 2 and an ACE of 95. Very much, excuse me, very much unexpected compared to what we all thought would be a very active year last year. Turned out not to be the case, but for impacts, it still definitely was. Really quick reflection on last year. What do you guys think?
Besides August, honestly, um, I thought it was a decent year. I mean, if August was at least average, I feel like we would see it as an above average year.
Yeah,
Since August was so bad, like it made the rest of the season look like less impressive. But the rest of the season was honestly pretty good, especially in November. November was like very unexpected for most. I mean, honestly, um, there was some hints in modeling that November was gonna be kind of active, but I mean, obviously, like you need to let the nature like actually perform it so people could believe it.
yeah,
So, but yeah, November definitely helped the overall numbers, especially like Nicole. And what was the other one before? Oh, the one in the Caribbean. Oh, Lisa. Lisa.
Lisa. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So that
Yeah, I
was,
think
yeah,
last year caught many people off guard, including me. Um, and like before the season, most people had forecasted solidly above average season with the slight potential for hyperactivity. But I think a lot of that thought died when we had that 2 month break between Colin and Daniel.
yeah,
I mean, that was weird. Like, I don't really. That has to be like a case for study for many years to come, because that was an incredible shutdown, considering the forecast and the um the overall state of the Western Hemisphere.
yeah,
But I think, as usual, September was pretty decent, and well, we saw with Fiona and Ian where, of course, you can never count off a season, even though it starts badly, because you can always have impacts. It doesn't
yeah,
matter what storm it is.
yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, very
May I
interesting.
add something?
Yeah,
Um, I mean, about the shutdown, like, if you notice from like October 2021 to September of 2022, like, I feel like all of that is connected. We didn't have a single hurricane from October 2021 all the way to September of 2022. Like 11 months without an Atlantic hurricane. Like that was
Yeah, yeah,
insane.
I remember that. I remember that because in 2021, some of us were saying that late season might have been pretty good, but we saw where October, November produced very little. And
Almost
we're
nothing.
also saying that it was weird that the EPAC had produced, what was it, I think two short-lived storms during La Nina.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like there was something, I don't know what it was, but something in the atmosphere was just different during that period. And it really caught a lot of us off guard.
Yeah. And I remember a lot of people talking about how it might have been like the late season of 2021 might have been a segue into the early season of 2022. Certainly, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that was theoretically actually the case. And I remember because of that, especially last year during August, just how many people suddenly had the obsession to start saying that the season would be worse than 2013. And some people know who I'm especially talking about, but
I mean, I was like not surprised. Not surprised.
Yeah, that the 2013 thing is pretty much like one of the most prominent memes in the community. You know, like that happens every year.
and it somehow
But I
always
mean,
returns
yeah,
every single year, some way, somehow. Even in
yeah,
2020 and even in 2017, people threw out in 2013, and sometimes I just do not get it at all.
honestly, though, there was a point last year, I will be honest, that I thought that the Atlantic would have ended really, really badly. Like, I was actually, after how dead August was, I was genuinely contemplating if we would have even passed like 50, 60 ACE. But I guess September saved the day as usual.
Yep.
September had to carry, and November carried.
Yeah,
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious.
regular
November
thing,
was more
though.
active than August.
And October combined.
Hell, January was even more active than August.
I think we had more ACE from the first, like what, three storms than like the next. No, we had more ACE from Alex than from the next two storms, Bonnie and was it
Pauline.
Colin? Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, last year
those
early
were very
season.
shortly.
Yeah, last year
Yeah,
early
so
season man was the disappointment.
yeah, the whole thing with PTCs last year was just crazy.
It was crazy. It was
Uh,
annoying. I remember early season last year. Yeah, I don't know. I did not like that at all.
yeah, it was really odd, really
Yeah.
odd.
Moving on to the year in review of the 2022 Pacific hurricane season. 19 named storms, 10 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes, and I just redid the research for this before the live today, and there were a total of 3 hurricane landfalls in the entirety of the Eastern Pacific Basin. All of which, of course, happened in Mexico, but still 3 hurricane landfalls, and I'm actually surprised that that was the case. With the ACE of 116, last year was, some argue, quite above normal considering it was a moderate La Nina, and also the fact that did find out that some people were saying arguably the atmosphere last year was responding in a super Nina like fashion. What do you guys think of that?
Mm. If that's the case, I mean, if the Atlantic was still able to produce 14 storms and a Super Nino, like that is scary. Like a Super Nino type of atmosphere, like that's crazy. I mean, I don't know if I buy into that, but like if it's actually a true thing, like that's crazy as hell.
I
In my
mean,
Hmm.
opinion.
the super linear thing is um like completely theoretical for now because we haven't actually seen um a La Nina that's been that strong. But but I think, yeah, it's a weird concept, and that if that period is indicative of what a super ninja would be like if it were to actually happen, then that'd be like a crazy thing to witness. Because I mean, if you have such cold anomalies in the Eastern Pacific, you really wouldn't expect much to be happening. But I guess there's still a lot of things that we still don't know about these basins. So I guess it would be a good case of study.
Yeah, I'm actually,
Yeah.
now that I bring that up, I'm actually very interested though, because I'm that, especially the fact that we've not really seen any sort of real super Nina. Like we see it with El Nino, but we do not see it with La Nina. La Nina, it's either they
Yeah,
last. La Nina is one thing I'll say. They tend to last longer than El Ninos. Like we never see three triple year Ninos.
yeah.
That's
We've never had a triple Nino.
yeah,
Yeah,
and yet we could see El Ninos rapidly transition to strong La Ninas, super El Ninos rapidly transition to strong La Ninas within months, aka 1997 and 1998. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
And yet we really don't see the opposite with La Nina, and La Ninas tend to definitely be a lot more stable. Too. Now that I think about it, that's very interesting. That'll certainly be a study we'll have to look at, or maybe a study that should be published, or maybe there is already, but we'll have to search for it and we'll probably go over it later. But moving along now to the predictions so far this year, I did mention earlier in the stream, CSU released their predictions 15-7-3. But there are a lot more predictions before that. One of them, of course, being Noah, which released 12 to 17, 5 to 9, and 1 to 4. So around a below normal to maybe a slightly above normal season they predicted. The talk of the town, though, the UK Met and the University of Arizona, both of them predicting very similar around 1920 storms, and both have five major hurricanes, though the UK Met has 20 named storms, 11 hurricanes, five majors, and the University of Arizona went with 1995. And the TSR actually did release a updated forecast yesterday from their. I honestly wouldn't really call it updated because they went up in one name storm, but I assume it is probably because of the January subtropical storm. But they went with 1362, which was the original Colorado State prediction back in April. My prediction in April was 13 to 18 named storms, and 6 to 9 hurricanes, and 2 to 5 major hurricanes, with a total of 3 to 5 U.S. landfalls. What am I forecasting this year? Well, you'll see in just a little bit. By the way, a closer look at NOAA's May 2023 hurricane prediction. Very interestingly enough, I want to start off with actually with the Central Pacific. They forecasted 4 to 7 tropical cyclones there, and they say the average is 4 to 5, which I actually didn't know. The Eastern Pacific, they forecast above normal, 14 to 20 named storms, 7 to 11 hurricanes, and 4 to 8 major hurricanes this year, and the averages are 15, 8, 4 in the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic. What we just went over, 12 to 17, 5 to 9, 1 to 4, and the average is 14, 7, 3. So near normal to maybe slightly above normal season in the Atlantic, above normal in the Pacific for both parts of the Pacific. What do you guys think of the NOAA forecast, really quickly?
I'm gonna say a hot take. For the East Pack, I honestly don't believe it's gonna be as active as Noah's predicting. I honestly I don't think the East Pack is gonna be shit. I mean, it's not gonna be, to me personally. I don't think it's gonna be like horrendous, but I don't see it being hyperactive this year.
Yeah.
For like how like I've been seeing modeling for like the early season, especially not really favoring it. I'm gonna say like 17-9-4 this year for them.
All right. Fair enough, Nate. What do you think?
yeah. I kind of agree with Danny. Like I've seen where a lot of things don't really indicate that the EPOC will be hyperactive this year,
Mm-hmm.
even though we should have a robust Nino event.
Yeah,
But I mean, I'm not too sure to be honest because I mean we've been guessing about so many things since the start of the year.
yeah,
One thing though, if the negative PDO holds, I'm sure that will have some effect on the basin and possibly limit the tracks as well as AC that the basin can produce. And also, if the Atlantic poses enough resistance to the water circulation, then we could see so maybe stiffer competition than we would have um and would have anticipated earlier
yeah,
in the year when we saw how likely it was that the Nino would become strong during peak season. Um, so I mean, I do expect the impact to be above average. I mean, that'd be crazy if it doesn't. But
yeah. We definitely would.
I don't think that it's very likely that it becomes hyperactive. Although there is a chance that happens. And
Yeah,
when you think about it, considering how strong the Ninias should be, you would expect that. But I feel like the Atlantic may cause it to as I said, the Atlantic may pose some resistance and create competition for the EPAC. So
yeah,
we'll see.
yeah. We'll see. We'll mention a lot of very interesting stuff that we're talking about the Pacific. We'll mention, of course, later on. So, in a typical year, what do we look for in the Atlantic? We look for warm sea surface temperatures in the tropical Atlantic, no El Nino, which is one of the contradictions to what's making this year very tricky, low wind shear, and of course, a strong tropical waves, strong African monsoon. That's something that we typically look for in the Pacific. A first factor that we typically look at, of course, we were just talk when we talked about it a lot throughout the stream so far, and so and of course, you can see in the Pacific right now, very warm, especially in the Nino 1, 2, 3 region. I will say the Nino 1, which is right this area right off the coast of South America. If you remember earlier on in the year, was absolutely well above normal. Um, it was really off the charts. In this anomaly chart, it was much more closer to these 5 degrees Celsius values off the coast of South America. Now this year is now closer in time now in May. Um, it's definitely cooled off a little bit. But something very interesting that I did find that will probably have some sort of impact to is the PDO, which is still in a negative state off the coast of the Baja Peninsula and off the west coast. You notice this cold pool that's associated with the negative PDO. Models do kind of have this dissipating over time, of course, in correlation with El Nino. But of course, whether that actually does remain the case, we'll have to see. But certainly very interesting. Indeed. So that's the current factor we have with the ENSO, and of course, as I did mention, ENSO predictions very strong on El Nino. This, of course, one thing looking at is the NOAA CPC ENSO probabilities at over 90% chance that we'll get an El Nino this year, especially by the time we get to the August, September, October period, the period for the peak. They have a 90% chance for El Nino. The model predictions for ENSO from the IRI. This includes the dynamical, the statistical, and I believe the average, and the CPC console. All of them are right now in El Nino, except the statistical. which very interesting is actually kind of remaining at the El Nino threshold and dipping below that, which I really don't buy that much, especially given the dynamical situation of this El Nino right now and the dynamical average right now. The model that we tend to look at more, or the models that most everybody is using, the one that's taking into consideration the actual factors going on right now, that's the dynamic average that has this that takes this strength of this El Nino to 1.5. So a very formidable El Nino indeed. The CFS V2 forecast as well, also on the train for very strong. They actually going to 2 degrees Celsius, and this has been something consistent for the past few months. And I don't know, what really quickly, what do you guys feel about the CFS? Because if I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure that I buy the CFS going 2 degrees Celsius. And I know some people do. Some people are definitely very certain that we'll have a very strong El Nino, but not too sure about that. What do you guys think?
I think honestly, um, I've said it since like January, February that the most I see this El Nino going is like 1.2, 1.3 range. Maybe 1.5 it gets lucky, but I don't really buy a super Nino happening.
Yeah.
I say high end moderate or low end strong, but like I don't see a world to me in my world that it goes over that. I don't see it.
Yeah. Nate, what do you think?
I was hesitant at thinking that first, but I've realized over the past few weeks that the um the growth of the El Nino hasn't really slowed down much. So I can kinda understand that the models are going for a strong Nino,
Yeah.
especially considering how strong the subsurface anomalies are.
Yeah.
But it all depends on the um the WWBs and how strong and how persistent they are. Because if we don't have a driving force to bring those subsurface heat, bring the subsurface heat to the surface, then we won't really see the El Nino growing that much.
Yeah.
But for this month, I think that the El Nino will start continue to grow. It will continue to grow. Um, but as we go into peak season, we have to see if we continue to have westerly wind bursts that help to continue to drive it towards becoming a very robust Nino event.
Yep. Yeah, we'll definitely see. The next factor, of course, we look at, as I did mention, is the Atlantic sea surface temperatures. And that's been one thing that everybody's been talking about this year, especially in my interests. The sea surface temperature anomalies in the Atlantic have been quite warm. In fact, the warmest we've seen in the last several years. And I'll show you in comparison to some. Well, first of all, we'll take a look at a correlation of Atlantic sea surface temperature anomalies to ACE, hyperactive ACE specifically. And you notice how well the correlation fits in the Atlantic. We have very warm deep tropics, very warm off the Canary Current, and that's especially been something that's been beginning to warm up over the last few weeks as well. And you take a look at that and how it correlates to how it typically looks like in really active seasons. And remember when I was talking about subtropics tending to be very warm, tending to be not as warm and much more on the cooler side. That is very interesting indeed of having an impact on conditions in the Atlantic. I think kind of has to do with the circulation of the currents, of the ocean currents, that kind of helps concentrate. That's why it's, or at least why it's very important in order to especially favor a more active pattern. We have to see a bunch of these warm anomalies concentrate in the deep tropics. And that has especially been something we've been lacking over the last few years. If you notice, especially last year, and probably one of the things, if you remember, we were talking about earlier We had this huge shutdown in August of last year. Probably a lot of people have been crediting the fact that we've had such a very warm subtropics, and how the subtropics, if you remember last year, exploded with warmth and kind of skewed the distribution of heat between the deep tropics and the subtropics, kind of skewed the atmosphere of the Atlantic, and kind of made things unfavorable. So that's why it's very important that we see colder anomalies beginning to show up in the subtropics this year, and that would probably help, in my opinion, with a better distribution of heat focused in the deep tropics, which is one big factor when it comes to the Atlantic seasons that we need to take into consideration. And so as I was about to say, here's a comparison compared to the last few years. And all of these are the most notable years of the last 10 or so, of the last 10 to 15 years. Actually, I would say 20. Of course, some of them being 2020, 2017, 2010, and 2005. And I'll be honest with you, this year definitely compares a lot more to 2010 and 2005 than it does to 2017. Even we're well above 2017. Go back to the map. Look how warm we are in the Atlantic compared to 2017. And 2020 pales. We're not even, 2020 is not even close to where we are right now. And in a normal year, as I did say before, in a normal year, that would certainly be something very, very concerning and very interesting. And certainly a sign, a very formidable sign of potentially the season we would see about to ensue. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that um, the correlation is pretty clear with the warm anomalies in the Canary Current and the MDR, and how they correlate with activity in the Atlantic. I think that um, with the relatively cool subtropics and the relatively cool equatorial Atlantic that we see now, that it does seem quite likely that um, instability will be focused in the MDR, and that might be a pivotal factor in seeing how active the Atlantic season becomes this year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Danny, what do you think?
Um, it definitely helps a lot that the subtropics are colder this year because it's going to allow for the MDR to centralize more for the energy for the basin. And
Mm-hmm.
since it's going to be more MDR like based season, and by the looks of it, it's going to help generate like I guess more ACE generated storms, like more ACE makers forming, since most of the energy is going to come from the MDR and favorability looks good in the MDR especially as well. So like adding on with the SSTs and stuff, I see the ACE being really good, some aspects, because of how those things are working and aligning with each other.
Yeah, would definitely agree. And I would definitely assume that this would have an impact on wind shear too. If you remember last year, a lot of people also say that that very same reason of the subtropics being very warm helped skew the pattern of the wind shear as well. Had a lot more cutoff lows, or tuts, as we like to say, that helped shear the Atlantic. And we'll probably have some sort of issue with that this year relating to El Nino, but kind of interested that all the major climate models seem to hint um, that, or at least what I have here, the cantips and the CFS, both for the August, September, October period, have very low wind shear values in the deep tropics, something very typical that you would see in a La Nina. So that's something very interesting. But a lot of the models generally show the same thing as well, as we were talking about earlier. Very warm Atlantic, and I'll show you in just a little bit, very precipitable Atlantic as well. And I did mention before, um, that when it comes to wind shear, and this is just again a reminder to everybody that's not familiar with how El Nino and La Nina impacts wind shear. And in a typical El Nino year, we tend to see a lot more increased vertical wind shear and trades in the Atlantic, creating greater atmospheric stability. Atmospheric stability is probably not going to be something we'll be seeing a lot of in the MDR, especially this year, considering how warm it is, and trade winds, which have been much weaker this year, a big contributing factor as to why the Atlantic is much warmer this year than we typically see, not just in El Nino years typically, but in any typical year. This year's Atlantic is definitely very, very interesting. And this year, of course, with the stronger vertical wind shear, models are seemingly in the deep tropics not really hinting at that being the case. While as in a La Nina, those factors such as more vertical instability and less stability in the atmosphere, and weaker vertical wind shear and trade winds are much more typical in a La Nina, and that's what seems to be the case this year, despite the fact that it's El Nino. So something to keep in mind. MJO too, and I will say that MJO definitely does have an El Nino signature. Um, one of that being a standing wave in the Pacific, very notably in the central and western Pacific, but also a lot of people are mentioning, and some, not a lot, but some people are mentioning on Twitter the fact that the models are forecasting that the standing wave will be focused towards the western and central Pacific instead of the central and eastern Pacific this year, might have an impact um, on potentially kind of showing off of a sign of how the Atlantic may have more rising motion, because maybe there's some sort of African standing wave influence on keeping the rising motion or the standing wave associated with this El Nino a little bit further west compared to usual. And that is definitely noticeable on both the CFS and the CANSIT models. And I did see some very interesting tweet about zonal winds as well. Also, more or less aligning a lot more with weaker El Nino years, where we tend to see a lot more of zonal wind anomalies or westerly winds, more or less associated in the western and central western Pacific and the Indian Ocean, as opposed to strong El Ninos where they're all throughout the Pacific. And this year we're trending a lot more towards a weaker moderate El Nino type composite. It's a very interesting tweet that I saw about a day or two ago. So something very interesting to keep in fact. But MJO is definitely still has some sort of signature of El Nino in it. Next factor we look at steering, and as I did mention this before, precipitation across the Atlantic, very, very precipitable. A lot of precipitation, very strong precipitation values in both models, which is why, if you remember earlier, we were talking about people saying the Kansas might have been over beefed. But if you take a look at that in comparison to what the CFS shows, they show basically the same thing. And keeping and noticing a very interesting track, or some people like to use precipitation anomalies to show tracks sometimes, or have some sort of hint of maybe tracks. And there's almost a direct track into Florida, which is something I find very interesting, and certainly maybe has some sort of reflection on my forecast. Of course, we have to see in a little bit. And then we take a look at the ridge pattern though, in the forecast this year, and definitely makes sense why there's a lot of precipitation in the Atlantic, not a lot of strong ridging across the Atlantic subtropics as a whole. So not a lot of a factor to keep trade winds strong, but also the fact that we do have, if you do notice, especially compared to the last few years, there's much more of a lack of strong upper level ridging, especially near the Atlantic maritime continent and also the Northeast. And the last few years we've had that, and that's helped contribute to very active landfall seasons here in the United States. And something that is definitely interesting is both models and this is definitely more in line with El Nino. A lot more troughing in the Atlantic subtropics, lot more of a lack of a ridging in. We could compare this to the last few years, the last most notable years of the positive AMO era that we've had so far, and you notice there's definitely a stout difference, much more ridging over the Atlantic Canada region and the Northeast, and even in the subtropics as well. And compare that to this year, there's much more of seemingly a trough signature around that region than there is a ridging. So maybe more of a chance for out to sea recurvatures. We'll have to see. Of course, that could definitely change as the season goes on. But we'll want to mention that as well. If I mentioned not long ago, that is typical of El Nino, where we definitely tend to see a lot more subtropics, out of tropic tracks, and you could especially see this is the TC track density anomalies, and you see a lot of negative anomalies, especially in the Caribbean and the Gulf. The Southern Gulf, especially near the Bay of Campeche, several of the areas that are most affected by El Nino, presumably, of course, by a stronger wind shear. But you also notice the track densities are a lot more in the subtropics and out of the deep tropics in typical El Nino years, as opposed to La Nina years, or as opposed to years that we've been seeing recently, where they tend to be a lot more in the deep tropics. Which, when you take a look at this pattern that the models are forecasting, a lot less of a ridge this year than the last few years, and especially when you compare it to the most recent active landfall years, it makes sense that that is the typical El Nino steering. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And finally, I believe this is the final thing I have, the African monsoon. And we also talked about this before when it comes to strong tropical waves, very strong African monsoon, and that's well depicted by both models, the CANTIPS and the CFS. You see very strong precipitation over West Africa, the most important part of Africa, in my opinion, when it comes to the African monsoon, because that's where especially most of these tropical waves take shape, and the more precipitation we see over this area definitely represents the more tropical waves, and also maybe the magnitude of these tropical waves being much stronger. And then you take that into consideration with the very precipitable tropical Atlantic. It all definitely makes sense. So with that being said, we have our seasonal parameters that we all just looked at. We have a very warm Atlantic. That is definitely a check. No El Nino, though, that is a no, because we are expecting El Nino, and a very formidable one indeed this year. Strong African monsoon we just looked at right now. That is definitely a check. Very strong monsoon expected this year. And very interestingly enough, what seems to be lower wind shear over the tropical Atlantic, models are kind of picking up on that too. So with that being said, my forecast for this year is drum roll, please. I guess this is what I'm expecting for the season. I'm expecting for my June 2023 Atlantic hurricane season forecast, taking into consideration everything I just talked about: 15 to 20 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 6 major hurricanes, with a total of 4 to 7 United States landfalls. Not hurricane, but all landfalls as a whole this year. Definitely uptrended from my April forecast. Gotta take into consideration how warm the Atlantic is. That I think that'll have an impact on how things are in the Atlantic. So there I have it, uptrending, potentially near normal as my base, to potentially well above normal season if everything goes on the high end. How do I say this? The best case scenario route for the Atlantic. And we'll take a look at the Atlantic key messages as well. I have key messages for the Atlantic. Chances increasing for potentially active or well above normal season in the Atlantic, as I mentioned. Water temperatures being a factor, and especially trending towards near record levels, which we went over just a few minutes ago. Peak activity may be very active, threatening the northern Caribbean islands, including the Bahamas, and potentially the Southeast, including all of Florida. You see it in here. All of Florida is in red. denoting high risk for impacts. And you do notice as well Bermuda and all the Northern Islands as well. I expect this year will be their year, and the Bahamas too, and a good portion of the Southeast from North Carolina to South Carolina under a moderate chance, and from South Carolina all the way till the Central Gulf. All bets are off, in my opinion. This year could definitely be a big, higher than normal threat year for them, especially considering how activity does tend to be a little bit more north in El Nino years, and consider how most activity over the last few years has been confined to the Gulf, especially with these in close developments that we've been getting, and a lot less a lot less tropical Atlantic development activity. More or less like a year 2017, where we have a majority of the systems develop in the tropical Atlantic and then make their way and end up, because of that, in the Northern Caribbean, threatening places like the Northern Islands, Puerto Rico, or Florida, for instance. I think this year could definitely, at least in track essence wise, we'll probably see something a lot closer to that, especially considering stuff like the warm Atlantic and other factors like what the models are showing, which seems to be a very formidable Atlantic signature this year. I do also mention as well, and Danny knows this because I've been talking about it with him, potential for maybe more late season activity as well, because I've seen maybe the models begin to kind of uptrend on the late season, at least of the last few weeks, with showing a little bit more of a favorable signature Western Caribbean into the Northeastern Gulf. That's where you see this track right here. Generally a track that could be reminiscent of Nate or Michael. Not, of course, the intensity. Well, intensity, if anything, will probably be closer to Nate than Michael. And God forbid we have another Michael. But track-wise, you'll definitely see some sort of reminiscent sort of situation. But then again, as I did mention, recurvatures are likely. Early recurvatures are much more likely this year, especially considering the pattern we're expecting, and that could put Bermuda or Atlantic Canada at risk. If you remember my April prediction, I had a much lower risk for Atlantic Canada. I decided to go moderate chance for them for my June forecast. And Bermuda, I went from moderate to now a high chance for them this year. And as I did mention before, early season tropical wave activity could be very strong due to an expected African monsoon that's likely to be strong, and wouldn't be surprised, in my opinion, my sole opinion, honestly, won't be surprised if we get a early season MDR development either in June or July. Wouldn't surprise me in the very least. Really quickly, I actually have now, as of this year, I'm starting this monthly breakdown. June, I have 1 to 2 named storms. July 2 to 4. August 3 to 5. September 4 to 6. October 2 to 3, and November 0 to 1. I did uptrend most notably in July, September, and October. I uptrended a little bit. I don't think I uptrended in August, but July, September, and October are the 3 main months that I uptrended in, especially considering activity, which could be more than what we thought. Now onto the Pacific. The Pacific, I have 17 to 22 named storms, 9 to 11 hurricanes, and 4 to 6 major hurricanes. El Nino will definitely have an impact. And honestly, I was now that I think about it, kind of hesitant on my upper end, if I'll be honest with you, especially considering when we look at the MJO forecasts and you notice the rising saw a lot more focused to the west instead of over the central and eastern Pacific like we would typically see in a traditional moderate or strong El Nino. But of course, El Nino will still be there, so we'll definitely have impacts. So we'll definitely see the influence, and we'll probably get a near to above normal Central Pacific as well, with a total of 4 to 6 storms, named storms as well. I didn't do hurricanes or majors because I'm not really that versed enough in the Central Pacific, I feel, to really do a forecast in depth like that. But I'm generally getting the idea we'll probably have a slightly above normal season in activity there. And in the Eastern Pacific as well, we'll definitely see a solidly above normal season there. But just how active and just how well it is in the range, we'll have to see. But here are my Pacific key messages. Activity is likely to be above normal, of course, due to the El Nino. Central Pacific is likely to be more active than recent years due to El Nino as well, and above normal chances for potential threats to Hawaii are possible. And that actually, I was going to mention, um, we have not gotten a Central Pacific formed storm in a while. Hone, we've been waiting on it for what, 3 years now, 4 years, right? And probably we'll see, in my opinion, we'll see Hone, which is the next named storm on the list in the Central Pacific naming list. That's the next storm for them, and I think that's likely. But I think with the overall idea that we'll probably see a more active, or El Nino will likely have its mark on the basin, probably going to see a more active season. So, in my opinion, probably could see Hawaii under threat. And impacts this year, I guess more typical of what the impacts we typically see in the Pacific in an El Nino, specifically in the Eastern Pacific, will probably eventually have some sort of recurve storm that heads into the Baja Peninsula at some point later in the season. Probably some activity that gets closer towards Mexico or stays close or maybe impacts Mexico, which is why I have a high risk for there. But generally, not anything more atypical in the Pacific than what we normally see. But one thing, most importantly, that I do want to mention is the season is definitely likely to start off slow. We're already seeing that, so that's something that I'm keeping in mind this year. With the season, in my opinion, honestly, possibly going to peak around the same time as the Atlantic, I would assume, especially when we take into consideration MJO. But given how the pattern is this year, I wouldn't be surprised if we see activity more in line with when the Atlantic peaks. Something a lot like 2019, if I remember that. The activity, there was quite a bit of activity in September around the same time the Atlantic was really active. So maybe we could have something like that as well. But of course, whether or not this year is above normal or below normal, it is always important to be prepared by supplies, and develop a first aid kit in advance so you're prepared for when a storm strikes. You don't want to be unprepared when a storm is coming and have to get everything at the last minute. Always good to have things ready in advance, in ahead of time, so I don't have to worry about it when something is coming directly at you. And sometimes, especially over the last few years with these in close developments, not a lot of people would have a lot of time to prepare anyway. So that's always something very important. Make sure to have a battery powered radio so you can listen to local information in case the power is out. Always get updates. So maybe something new is occurring and you want to know what's going on. That is important to have a radio always, especially when it comes to major hurricane landfalling situations. You'll definitely need that. It's a very handy tool. Check with your insurance plans, because I remember I think last year, the case with Ian, there was a huge insurance disaster and a lot of people lost their homes, especially owners of multiple homes. They lost their homes because of insurance not really being able to cover that well. It's something along the lines of that, but I know insurance for Ian was a disaster last year. So make sure, in order to avoid that happening to you, to check with your insurance plan before a storm impacts to make sure you're covered. Or if you get damage to your house, you are able to recover and rebuild quickly, and of course with that little headache after a storm hits. And remember, of course, very important for evacuation, when it's time to evacuate, know your zone. Very important for that as well. For the future of my forecasting, as I did mention, June, we already did that. We already had our qualitative discussion in December. If you remember that, we had our April forecast, which now that's obsolete, so no bother looking at it, although you can still if you want to. But we have our we have our August forecast, one final forecast to go August 1st, and we'll probably do it in a live stream setting similar to this. That'll be the mid-season forecast, the final one as well, and we'll include Pacific and Atlantic forecasts too, to go over things that are happening in both basins, and of course an update to conditions pertaining to that time period, of course, when things update with new information we get, and of course observations from the season already occurring. So August 1st, mark that on your calendar. That's when the final forecast from me will be released before the peak of the hurricane season. So let's take the time right now. What are your thoughts?
A lot to take in.
I'd imagine.
I'm not. Is it alright if I say my prediction?
Sure, go ahead.
Um, well, I predict 17 named storms, 8 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. And for the majors, I predict one of them in July, one of them in August, and 2 of them in September. October is possible as well. I'm kind of interested, but like since it's a little bit too far out, still I'm gonna say 4 for right now.
Yeah.
But that's what I think. I have to go to, by the way, but I appreciate having the time to join the stream.
Yeah.
And being with you guys. But have a nice night, everybody.
All right. You too, Danny.
All right.
Nate, what do you think?
Bye. Bye.
All right. See you, Danny. Nate, what do you think?
Well, it is a negative forecast.
Yeah.
And I guess that's mainly due to the fact that the Atlantic is so anomalously warm that we're not completely sure about the effect it will have.
Yep.
But we have seen objective data where um, a very warm Atlantic correlates with um, AC values generally over 100. So I guess it's possible that we do see a season, one hampered by El Nino, but one that is still able to put up decent numbers
Yeah.
in the face of that El Nino. Um, on the TS numbers, I don't think that they are generally outlandish because we have seen seasons where we've produced a lot of name storms that don't necessarily go on to become hurricanes because of
Yeah.
high share
Mm-hmm.
or dry air.
Yeah.
But I think it is possible that we do see quite a number of storms this year.
Yeah.
Um, for majors though, I doubt we see more than um, 3. In a very very good case, could maybe see 4. I doubt we see more than 3.
Yeah.
I think that considering the share that the El Nino should impart this year, I think that um,
There should be.
storms will find it hard to really ramp up. I don't think we'll see many rapidly intensifying storms this season because of the likely unfavorable conditions that the storms are meeting, maybe because of the touch. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think we'll see quite a number of storms and a fair number of hurricanes.
Yeah.
And for US landfalls, I think that well, it really comes down to when the ridge is at its strongest because
Mm-hmm.
there are seasons where the ridge is forecasted to be strong, but it ends up not being strong when we start to peak in activity.
Yeah.
And so a lot of land masses are spared.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's really it really could be anything because you can have landfalls from storms that form right in your front yard. I mean, like TD2 literally formed right beside Florida. So you can
Yeah.
have storms like that that just
In close
form
development. Yeah.
right before they move into land. Um, you can have storms that form right in the Bahamas area and just quickly move towards the US. And you can have storms that make it all the way from the MDR, and because of a strong ridge, they are able to the US. So
Yeah.
it all depends on timing
Yeah.
and the strength of
Yeah.
the
That
wind. So
is
we'll see.
that is definitely very important. All right. I guess since we're coming to a close, why not really quickly before we go a little bit of hurricane trivia? Did decided to do this. Probably won't be as excited because we don't have as many people as I anticipated, but still, let's why not make this.
Yeah.
But why not do some hurricane trivia? Gonna start off easy, and then we're gonna get progressively harder. So keep that in mind. But first of all, let's start off with probably
All
something
right.
very interesting, very easy. When was the last time we had a major hurricane landfall in New York? I'm not gonna say the answer because I know the answer because I had to research all this. Uh, but anybody in the chat that's there right now joining in that could give their answer, and of course anybody on stream as well. What's your guess, Nate?
Major hurricane landfall in New York.
Yeah, last time.
That was a hmm, that must have been quite a while ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, but
Um,
not quite as far back as
was
people
it?
think.
Was it? It's not in this century, right? I'm pretty sure it's
No,
not in this century.
no, absolutely not.
No. Was it in the 80s?
No, farther back.
Back. Um, New York. Um, was it in the 60s?
You're getting closer, but no. Gotta go a few years. You gotta go a few years before that.
Hmm.
Want me to reveal the answer? You've up.
Yeah.
All right. Here he is. The answer is Hurricane Carol of 1954. A lot of people, I think, would assume it was a great hurricane of 1938, but actually it's not, which is why I was expecting for people to get thrown off. But yeah, that was the last
That
one.
one is that one is Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, actually, it hit Eastern Long
Or did
Island.
it? Oh, okay.
Landfall in far Eastern Long Island, then it hit Rhode Island as a C3, and then it hit Long Island, then Rhode Island as a C3. All right, next question.
Oh,
What is the amount of major hurricane landfalls on? What is the most amount of major hurricane landfalls on record in the USA in 1 year? Hint: this happened very recently, not 2020 though.
1 year. Um,
It's one of the
all right.
infamous
Let's
seasons.
see. And this is including outlying islands or just mainland?
Just mainland.
Just mainland. Um,
Alan, for the previous question, Alan was gonna say 38, but yeah, it was 1954. Yeah, go ahead. Alan, you got it right. Alan got the answer right. It is
that's
2005.
right.
Yep, 2005. Four major hurricane landfalls on the United States in 1 year. That was 2005.
Where the Dennis was one, Wilma
Yep,
was one, Katrina was one,
Rita.
and right.
Yep, four. All right, question three. What year had the most amount of rapidly intensifying storms on record in a single year? Hint: it's actually multiple, but I think you guessed one of them, which was recently.
Yeah, everybody knows 2020 is one of them.
Yep,
Um,
that's
let's
right. But
remember
can you guess
other
the other?
years.
Can you guess the others?
was in the late 90s, I'm pretty sure.
More or less. It was in the 90s, but
Um, hmm, is it 95?
yep. And there's one more. This one is also more
One more.
recently, but a little bit obviously before 2020.
Hmm.
Alan, that is not right. 2020 is right, but 2005 and 2017 are not right. You want me to reveal the answer?
Yeah.
All right. It is. Oh, it's gonna load. 2020, 2010, and 1995. All three of
2010,
them.
really?
Yep. 2010. All of them had 9 named storms that rapidly intensified each. Uh, and I actually searched it up that had Gamma because I got this from Colorado State University, the summary of 2020, and they did mention Gamma also rapidly intensified, but it was a tropical depression when it began its rapid intensification, so it didn't count. So 2020 right now ties 2010 and 1995 for 9 named storms of rapid intensification. Quite incredible, as was the whole 20 season. Next question: what tropical cyclone has set the record for the longest lasting Category 5 in consecutive days? And hint, I'm talking about global, not just Atlantic.
Global. Boy, that's the. Um,
Hmm.
that definitely has to be a Westbrook story.
I'll give it to you that it is.
Um, I mean, there's so many names. I don't know. Is it Fengchen?
Huh?
Is it Fengchen?
No, it's before. It's before. It's when. How do I say this? It's when. It's when the West Pacific was using white names. So before the 2000s, when they started using
Oh.
more. When they started using more like names from different countries.
Um. hmm, I have no idea.
All right.
Did anybody in the chat get to it?
No, nobody messaged it. And by the way, Alan, you got 2020. Then I saw you had 1995, but still no 2010. So yeah, you only got 2 right for the last one. But for this one, it is Typhoon Nancy of 1961, and it was a Category 5 consecutively for 5.5 days. Incredible.
And I mean, 5 days is wild. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, nobody's gonna get this right, but I decided to do it anyways. Name on the screen. Gonna have to wait like several seconds, but it's a storm from the 19th century, obviously, from the 20th century, obviously. You should see it now. You see it? You see it?
Did this storm hit Georgia?
Mm-mm. Nope. Guess the year.
Um. Hmm. So then how the map looks at, guess it's before the 60s.
Yep, that's right.
Um.
It's not too far from the 60s. It's not in the 50s though. It's before that. But it's not that it's not like early 1900s either.
Uh, um, Probably think this is random names. The Carol?
No, this is not Carol. This is, I'm gonna reveal the thing now. Alan, actually, I think you could full screen and maybe zoom in, because that's the thing. You could actually zoom in on YouTube, on a YouTube video. So try doing that if you can't see. But I'm gonna reveal the answer anyway. This is the 1944 Great Atlantic Hurricane.
Oh,
I think it
not sure I heard of that one.
made landfall in the Northeast or New York. I think is like a C2. So very interesting storm. The next question, by the way, 10 questions total. So on question 6, what year was the most active Eastern Pacific hurricane season on record? Hint: it happened in a year where there was a very infamous storm in the Atlantic.
Wait for the chat to answer that one.
I'll give you a hint though. The storm is very infamous, and for I shouldn't have said it, but I should. Can you guess it? It's a very infamous storm, and it's very infamous for one particular infamous state. Let's see. No, not 2018. 2018 was the most ace in one single year in the Eastern Pacific, but I'm talking about named storms. This year was actually the second most ace in the Eastern Pacific, but it had the most named storms. Let's see. Got some more people. Uh, what it was, you guess?
Did they get it?
No.
1992, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. 1992. 1992, 27 named storms. Uh, Nobody goes by name storms when they talk about activity. Nah, I disagree with that. Or at least when it comes to activity, when most active season, everybody always talks. Most of the time, they mean by. I mean, the default answer is always name storms. At least in my opinion. When you clarify ace, then you go with ace. 2018 was the most ace in the season, but the most active actual season in the Eastern Pacific was 1992, and there was 27 named storms in 1992. I said it was a very infamous year because, of course, we had Andrew, which is very infamous for Florida. Next question, guess this storm. You're gonna take like a few seconds for you to see it, but and hint there's two. I'm gonna give you a hint right now. There's two. The storm that I'm about to see. There's two of them, and they occurred. Uh, they occurred in several years apart. There's one that's the more infamous one that we all think about when we see something like this, and there's one that occurred several years later that was similar intensity, but not much thought about. Guess which one it is? Because I already know the answer most people are going to go for. Guess it.
So I'm guessing it's not Galveston.
It is a Galveston storm, but the year, guess the year.
Not 1900.
Yep, that's correct. It's not 19. It's not the 1900 one.
Was it in the 20s?
No, but close. No, Alan, it's not the one in 1900. I'm just gonna Should I, or you want to guess?
Alright, my final guess is going to be 1919.
19. Nope, it is 1915. There was a 1900 one, and then there was the less infamous 1915 one.
How strong did that one get?
Similar, I think it was similar intensity to the 1900 one at landfall. I think they were both C4s at landfall. That's what I know.
Oh,
But I guess because it's not a lot of people talk about it because they happen like kind of close to each other, and most people think about 1900
yeah.
anyway because of its impact. But there was also 1915, and that's what I chose to kind of trick everybody. Question 8: what is the heaviest natural object that was moved in a tropical cyclone? And this happened recently, as in the last. This happened within the last 10 years.
I must have required a lot of research.
Yeah. What you're saying that this must have required research? Eh, you can look
Yeah,
at it
to
on
get ready for this
Wikipedia.
one.
Let's just say that you can look at it on Wikipedia pretty easily if you go to the right thing.
Are you talking about a single object or?
Any sort of natural objects. Oh, actually, I meant to for this one. I meant to say what storm had the. I actually meant to say what storm because yeah, but just think about it. What storm moved the heaviest natural objects? Think about that, and this happened recently. Just uh quick one that I'm kind of changing. But what storm moved the heaviest natural object ever recorded to be moved in a system? This happened recently, and this is a very infamous storm, but it's not in the Atlantic.
I'm going to guess this is a westbound storm again, or not?
Yep.
Okay. Um, is it Goni?
No, but it's a storm that a lot of people were comparing Rolly to. Rolly was 2020, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people were comparing the storm to it because of its intensity and the way it looked on satellite and area it impacted too. By the way, this storm happened before 2020.
Hmm. My next two guesses are Meranti and Nepartat.
Nope. I'll give you one more guess. Want to take it?
Hmm. Wait, no, I shouldn't have guessed Nepartat because Nepartat didn't really look like Goni. Um, hmm.
Whoa! Where did Rolly impact?
Say
What
that again?
what country did Rolly impact?
Goni, the Philippines, and I think Vietnam.
What infamous storm recently in the last 10 years impacted the Philippines?
Oh, oh, wait, Haiyan?
Yep, Haiyan.
Oh,
Haiyan had forgot what it was, but it was a very heavy object that was moved by Haiyan. Kind of crazy. It was actually very heavy, and I found it very interesting, so I decided to put it in. But yeah, it
what
was
was it?
Haiyan. Huh?
What was the object?
I'm actually gonna search up right now. Tropical. cyclone records, because that's why I literally got this off. Tropical cyclone records from Wikipedia. I'm gonna search it up right now. Hold on.
Alright.
Where the hell is it? Heaviest natural object moved by tropical cyclone, 177 short tons, which is 160,572 kilograms. Kilograms, right?
Yeah.
And that was by Typhoon Haiyan. But 160,000 kilograms.
What was the object that weighed that much?
I have no idea. It just says the weight of the object. But still, it's Haiyan. It's crazy. All right, almost done. 9 questions. What is a storm? Guess the storm that's on the screen. Probably is going to take a little bit of time for you to see it, but I'll give you a hint. It obviously happened in the 1900s and early 1900s. Guess it. You see it now? See it now?
I'm not seeing it for some reason.
Can you see it?
Oh, okay, yeah, I see it now.
All right.
This was the name of this storm. Is this an A storm?
This was not a named storm. This was before they named it. They named storms.
Oh.
Let's see. Let's see if anybody got in the chat. Nobody got in the chat yet. Anybody in the chat, make a guess. Maybe you might guess it right. Maybe somebody actually knows this one.
Which state did this hit? Mississippi?
Alabama, Mississippi, around that area, Gulf Coast. You give up?
Yeah.
All right. Here it
How
is.
this storm is that popular?
It is the 1916 Gulf Coast hurricane, and fun fact, it was a July major. Landfall, I think, in like early July.
It's crazy.
And also another fun fact, that year also had 2 July majors. It's the only year besides to have 2 July majors. And by the way, that other July major also made a landfall in the United States, though it was not a major when it did. It was only a.
I think 1916 was one of the very active years in the early.
Yeah, it was pretty active. I think it was actually the most active landfall year for the United States before 2020.
Before 2020, yeah.
Yep, that's where this came from.
That
and final question: what is the highest wave height ever recorded for a tropical cyclone? And hint: this happened in the Atlantic, and this is actually a somewhat recent year. But I'll just give this. Name the tropical cyclone, and if you get the tropical cyclone name right, I'll show the answer. But if you can guess the wave height, then I'll show that
Always
too.
on the chat. I think I know the storm, but I'm not sure about the wave height.
All right, just name a storm.
I think it's Ivan.
A little bit before that.
Ivan?
No, it's not Ivan. Ivan actually had the fastest moving seafloor on record for a tropical cyclone.
That's interesting.
I was actually gonna do that, but no. But it's a little bit before that, and it's a year that we mentioned so far. Towards the beginning, we mentioned this year. It's a storm from that year. It's a very infamous storm, and a lot of people say that it was the Irma before Irma.
There was in the 90s then.
Maybe.
Was it in 95?
Maybe.
Um, 95, 95. It's not Bhopal.
Yeah, it was not Opal. That's right.
Is it, I don't know, Louis?
Yes, that's right, Louis.
Oh, that's more.
95, 1995, and height of 30 meters or 98 feet.
Wow.
That was insane. And hey, that's the title picture that I had. And that's the end of hurricane trivia. That's all the questions I had. And I guess since we don't have much to talk about after this, we could just wrap up the stream from here. Since we don't have much going on. Anyways, hope you enjoyed that kind of segment of hurricane trivia. And I really enjoyed it. Should I make it return for August when I do my August predictions?
I think you should, yeah. This was good.
Yeah, hopefully we can have more people though, because that would have been much more fun.
Yeah. It would be good to have more participants.
Yeah. I mean, between now and then, I'll probably be able to get more subscribers, so more people participating in the chat, and also, of course, more people here too, since we'll not have a lot going on since it'll be in the middle of the summer. So hopefully. But anyways, that does wrap up day one of the hurricane season. 182 more days to go, and definitely a journey from here on out we'll experience, and hopefully it won't be a crazy hurricane season. Especially hopefully that El Nino will take control. But I mean, it all depends. Personally, I think that we'll probably see a less influence from El Nino than we think. But it all depends. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. Have a great night. I will not be posting a video tomorrow because I will be busy as hell. But I will post a video on Saturday, and I think I'll actually go over my forecast again on Saturday in video form, though, for those that were not able to catch tonight's live stream. But other than that, stay safe, everybody. Hope you enjoyed, and we will talk again very later. See ya.
Alright, later everyone. Hope you have a good night.